You are listening to the Catch Up podcast today with myself, Phillip Blackmore. I'm joined by Steve Snowden, who talks us through his journey.
So my ERP history goes back quite some way, to be honest. And as a contractor, you're sitting there thinking, where will my next contract come from? There seems to be a lot going on in that sector at the moment. I want to get good at that.
Did your role change a little bit at that point? I don't know, were you still doing some consulting at that point? Were you still on site?
Yeah, no, I still do. I still do some now, actually, which I don't think is actually a good idea, but I just don't think they'll leave it behind. You get your data right and you get that first template right, then everything else will become a lot more straightforward. And then it was time to make a decision. Was I going to stay in business and change, or was it time for some ERP?
From where he sits today, currently as founder, director of Snowden Consulting, through and back to his early years as an independent Microsoft Dynamics manufacturing solution architect. Steve, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. It's an absolute pleasure. It's been a little while since I think you or I have directly spoke, but I know you still speak with a colleague or two of mine at Catch. One of the reasons I thought it'd be a fascinating conversation with you today is I appreciate today you are where you are as founder, director, owner of Snowden Consulting Limited, but I think a really interesting story for the audience is kind of the journey that you went on. How did you get there? And then obviously then growing the business as well as you have, establishing it as well as you have also. So if you wouldn't mind, just a little bit of a synopsis, where did you get into the tech space? What was the first role? And then maybe what was your first touch point with the Microsoft Dynamics product? So yeah, if you're able to start with that would be a fascinating place to start, if that's okay.
No problem at all. And then good to see you, Phil. So my ERP history goes back quite some way, to be honest. I was working in, after various jobs, after sort of like leaving, doing A-levels and things like that. Yeah. I eventually got a job in a pharmaceutical plant, and we were making drug delivery devices, things like that, on an old AS400 system.
Yeah, JBA.
Yeah, it was fast, but but that was about it.
There's still a few of those knocking about now, Steve. Would you believe it?
I know, and people still hold on to them for dear life.
Yeah, they do. I love it.
So I was working in the pharmaceutical plant, and I was doing injection molding and high-speed assembly and those sorts of things. And I managed to have an injury to my leg, and as they were doing their SAP implementation,
right.
So I was sort of like said, "Oh well, you can't do anything else. Can you help with this?"
Yeah.
And that sort of like piqued my interest a little bit, really. What's this ERP stuff? We're going back 25, 30 years.
Wow. So sort of 1995 in that.
Yeah.
1995. Well, wow. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so then I learned a lot during the implementation. They were a fairly large organization that was doing the project.
Yeah.
Saw some of the problems they were having, helped with a lot of the things on there. But then my sort of time came to an end there, really. Through choice, it was a case of career progression. And I didn't really realize how much I'd learned about SAP and all of the processes and everything else. And then I joined a very large construction company who also had SAP.
Yeah.
And when I went there as a continuous improvement manager, which is pretty much really my sort of like first love, to be perfectly honest. That's the bit that I enjoy even in what we do today.
Sure.
And when I got there, and in a company of like 2,000 people, they said, we've got all of these continuous improvement initiatives, but we don't know how to find the money. Right. We don't know where to look.
Sure.
And they said, we heard you know quite a lot about SAP. And that became my role for 3 or 4 years of, how much is a plant spending, overtime rates, scrap reduction, and all those sorts of things. That actual company then decided it was then splitting in half. They were going to sell half of their business. And in order to do that, they needed to move to a different ERP system for one half of the company. So there was a SAP migration to, at the time, AX 2009.
Okay, right, fine.
Yeah.
And did they go out to a consulting partner? Did you get involved in that selection piece as well?
I didn't do the selection piece, but my first job actually, as part of what was the change team at the time, was to go and collect all of the processes from the 52 plants around the UK and make sure that everybody operated in the same way. So it was a year's project, and we gathered 1,000 different processes, me and a small team. It was really great fun, actually.
I bet.
Country.
Yeah, and, absolutely.
We then rationalized that down to 400 processes. And then when the partner did come in, we said, this is the system we want based on these processes here. and I was given a lead, like project manager type position for the supply chain and operations side of the implementation.
Yeah, fascinating.
Learned a lot on AX 2009. Great go live, to be honest. It was 52 sites. I think we did 26 and 26, 2 separate go lives. 18 months later, live. And then it was time to make a decision. Was I going to stay in business and change, or was it time for some ERP?
Yeah. And that was it at that point that you did then step into that sort of pure ERP space, stepping away from the continuous improvement piece.
Yeah, I joined a gold partner. I actually I remember taking a pay cut to go and do that because I decided this was my path.
Sure.
And I was with 2 or 3 partners for a couple of years, and then some contract roles came up.
Sure. When would this be? When would that roughly have been, Steve? Just out of interest in terms of timelines, if you're looking back now.
Looking back now,
10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, probably about 15 to 16 years ago now, yeah.
So you would have probably, I was talking to an individual about this the other day, you would have probably been in that early bulk of people that did go contracting, because 15 years ago, 16 years ago, I remember in the Microsoft Dynamics space, there was a handful of contractors. It wasn't what I would say is, the market wasn't as big. There weren't as many people in it. So percentage-wise, I don't, it may have been similar, but definitely, did you feel when you were going out at that time that you were one of, I guess, a handful of contractors at that time going out into the market?
It was a lot of fun back in those days because there wasn't many of us, and I used to actually pick projects, sometimes just not to do with the project, but to do with the location. So I'd do one in Europe or globally, and then I'd come back and do one in the UK because I thought, well, I haven't worked there before. And then I used to choose sectors as well. So I'd go, I'll do a manufacturing one. I haven't done a retail one. I'll do that. Not for profit. So I got around. It was good fun. Yeah.
But it's an interesting, and a few of the sort of points that you've made there in terms of, I guess, some of the things that have evolved in time, and COVID affected this, but your talk, and I could see there the enjoyment of the traveling piece. You mentioned on that first project 52 sites, and how it was good fun going around and sort of being on these sites and being part of a team, and that's kind of what it is like that today in certain aspects, but definitely it did feel quite different 15 years ago. Does that resonate a little bit with you? Do you think that's right, or hasn't it changed? And I'm talking from an outsider's point of view. You're still in it day to day and have your team delivering it, but does it feel quite different when you look back at 15, 10 years ago to today?
Oh, 100%. I can look back to some of the contracts that I did at the time, and I'd be away Monday to Thursday at least, and that would be on client site, and I was there for 2.5 years. And it is COVID that changed it. There is a lot more teams. I think also everything's very, very expensive now. Hotel back in those days, you probably get 50, 60 quid. Now you're looking at £200, £300, £400 per night in a hotel, which doesn't really work as well. But it's a shame in some ways, because to me, the best projects are the ones where you have got those people in a room working together, getting those relationships. And you can do a lot on Teams, but you can't quite get to that level of camaraderie and sort of like all fighting for that goal towards the end.
Yeah, and I think that is quite a seismic shift and change. We've noticed it on our side of the fence. Previously, I remember vividly trying to organise interviews. You mentioned when you started working for a gold partner. And I would remember trying to organise an interview for a consultant who was travelling like you Monday to Thursday, with like a practice manager who was also travelling various parts. And we used to be sort of organising interviews on a Friday or a Thursday evening, trying to tie up where someone was driving to, where they were going home, and try and get them to meet at a service station to have interviews. And the logistical part of our job was actually a significant part of our job as well, like making the logistics of interviews work. And to be honest, over the space of about, as soon as COVID hit, that just was eradicated, and it's never really gone back to that. It hasn't, because of the ability to do things via video and Teams, which, as you say, there are benefits and there are positives to it, but that human piece, that personality, relationship building piece, you do lose a bit of that, don't you?
Yeah, I think where you miss it the most, and it's sometimes realizing sort of like the impact of the projects that you're working on. So when I was doing sort of like the work with some of the bigger not-for-profits, and you're going out to Africa, and you're saying, right, I'm putting this system in so that these people can get perhaps services that they are critical for them, absolutely vital. you don't see that on a Teams call. You might hear about it and you might think, oh, that might be useful for them. But being firsthand out there is a completely different level.
Yeah. Seeing it firsthand and actually the impact it can make, of the positive impact it can make doing this systems implementation right. And obviously the alternative side is, if it's not done right, the negative impact it can have for an organization like that is seismic. And when you talk about, again, Steve, there sort of covering that piece, did you make a very conscious effort when you were consulting to try and work across different industries? Was it purely a sort of piece of for your own knowledge, for you furthering your own sort of I guess ability and capabilities, or were you ever thinking kind of longer term? In terms of where you're at Snowden now, Consulting Limited, were you ever sort of thinking down the line? I need to do this for this, or very much at the time was it just purely I want to provide myself with as much knowledge, as much exposure to various different clients and industries as possible, to be as well-rounded a consultant as you can be?
It was a bit of both, actually. So, and some of them were actually driven by sort of changes in the technology that was coming along. So in the earlier stages, when I was like, manufacturing was what I'd grown up on, and in the various different places, and I'd done that a few times, but then retail really quite interested me.
Sure.
So that was definitely a choice to think there's another skill set here. And as a contractor, you're sitting there thinking, where will my next contract come from?
Of course.
There seems to be a lot going on in that sector at the moment. I want to get good at that. I've always been that person that wants to be really good at it if I'm doing it. Not sort of like, I'll just come in and do this small part. I'll come in and a lot of the times in the earlier projects, I'd often end up as the sort of PM on the project as well as doing the consultancy part.
Sure.
When 2012 was sort of like coming to the end of what that would be implemented and D365 came out, I was very keen not to be left behind. It's contract, when you're in that contract space, you need to keep your skills up to keep up there. So when the big not-for-profit one came along, not only was it in something that I thought that looks incredibly interesting, but it's also going on D365, and it was pretty much one of the first ones to even attempt it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was a main driver behind that particular one.
Yeah, understood. And Steve, when you look at, I guess, the early experiences you had that you mentioned within, I think the pharmaceutical business or the SAP business you went to, where there was 52 sites, some of your learnings there, going out, being on the road, being part of a team, mapping those processes, whatever it was, 1,000 down to 400. Are there any learnings from that work that you still look at and take into your work today? Sort of, things that you learned, things that you saw that worked well, or the other side, things that you think, that didn't work so well there. So you learn good and bad. But do you still think, you look back at that and there were some really sort of strong learnings that sort of resonate with you and how you deliver projects today?
Yeah, there was a very big shift. So in this sort of like earlier years of when we were doing implementation, it was very much a case of, we will look at what your as-is processes are, and we will map that to the system, and we will look at what your to-be processes are, and you will design them with us, and you'll know exactly what you're getting. And then over the last few years, there's been quite a shift from a lot of people that have sort of said, we are going to follow what is in the ERP system. We're going to use their processes, and that's how we're going to operate. And that only really works up to a point. If every business did exactly the same thing all of the time, then you wouldn't have your competitive advantages and all of those things. So the best implementations still do take that effort, but there's time, there's cost, there's all of those sorts of things. But just adopting exactly what is in the system. Don't get me wrong, you don't want to go and completely customize everything that you do. But you do need to sit there and think about what you want. I think there needs to be more focus on what you actually want to achieve, as opposed to, this is what the system does and we'll just follow that path.
Fine. And is that something, I guess, from your perspective at Snowden, is that where, I guess, you look to add that real value add piece to a customer? When you're looking at that, it's kind of, yes, this is what Microsoft Dynamics does, but also we're going to look at you as a business, your business processes, and kind of, make the best of the two.
Exactly that. So, sometimes you go to a business and you look at the process that they've got at the moment and you think, wow, that can be seriously improved by taking the standard.
Yeah.
And, we'll come on to it shortly, but one of the things that we've really done here is we've taken a lot of people from end users, from industry that sort of know what business processes are, so that we can have that discussion and say, look, this is what the standard does, this is what you do, but we actually think there's a better way. And we can take you through that and explain what that is, and talk about the impacts that can have in other areas of the system and those parts as well. There's a much bigger drive towards process now with everything that's going on. When I said beforehand there was, we'll take what's in the system, that's going to change quite a lot now, because process is going to be key, as it always has been, but even more key with the advent of AI and things like that. You have to follow that.
Fine. And then, Steve, if you look at, for you at a personal level, when I look at, so kind of, we've talked about it, the journey that you sort of went on from, the role that you performed early years into, I guess if I described you as a D365 or a Microsoft Dynamics manufacturing retail solution architect, what was the kind of biggest learning curve for you from going from Steve Snowden, I'm on a project, I'm delivering as a solution architect, to Steve Snowden, owner, consultancy director of Snowden Consulting with team and building? I think for the sort of anyone that sat there, there may well be people out there sort of looking at it and thinking of themselves as, I'm a contractor. Where do I go? Like, where does my career go from here? And I think, there's a great example, Steve, that's what you were. You were a contractor at a point in time.
Yeah.
Had you always thought about doing what you're doing today, as in that was always a driver for you and in the back of your mind? And did you sort of build up to it? How did it kind of work for you?
To be honest, it wasn't something that was on my radar for quite a long time. A lot of the time when I was on projects, they were full on, and you'd get to the end of one and you'd be like, okay, I'm ready for a bit of a break now, and we'll go on to the next one. But there came a stage after doing the contracting for 6 or 7 years, I just didn't really feel like it was quite enough. I was being offered lots of different contracts all of the time, and sitting there looking at some of them thinking, well, I'd really like to do that, but I can't do that because I'm on this one. And it started, well, it couldn't have started any smaller. It started with one person, and somebody had a conversation with me and said, I think I know somebody that could be your great first employee. And and that became my first person, and their brother became my second person. So,
absolutely. And then, was in those early days, did it feel quite different, or did it happen a little bit organically in terms of, because you had a good network within the market, you were well known within the market, you were very well respected for the job that you did in the market. I always thought, if we had a manufacturing senior level lead architect type role, retail, whatever it may be, experience, you were often one of the first people that I'd sort of drop you a note and check in and say, hey, Steve, that kind of, that journey from being you, Steve, to being sort of those early days of a consultancy, were there quite some big learning curves there in that early year for you? And out of interest, if you'd be able to share some of those, it'd be interesting to hear.
Yeah, almost too many, but I think you have to take your learnings and also also a bit of realization of actually what you're probably okay at as well.
Yeah.
So I've always had that sort of drive to say I will get it done, and if it's going to mean I'm there till 2:00 in the morning, I'll get it done. May not be the most productive way. When you start employing other people, even if you just employ one, then suddenly you're a business and you have responsibility. So it's okay. Yeah, I need to make sure they're getting here safely. I need to make sure that they're working with me and they're learning these things.
Absolutely.
And if I took my time back again, I would change a lot of those things. But when you're starting from a position of one, you only have so much flexibility. So I don't beat myself up about it too much. But in hindsight, I should have been more prepared for that first person and develop them. But in other ways, they probably learned a great deal from that experience as well. Project-wise, you're not going to win too many projects with yourself and your sidekick in those early stages. So it's more about they're helping you. Then when they're ready, you can introduce them to a client and they can help a bit there as well. But it's quite slow to start off with. And
and I guess when you say it was quite slow to start off with, so where you're at now, and we'll get onto that in a little bit more detail shortly. But when you look at the timelines from it, kind of you starting or sort of being more of Snowden Consulting rather than Steve Snowden, I am an independent contractor, and it being you have 1 and 2 employees, the kind of time from sort of being 1 or 2 employees to having sort of 10 employees, and like then sort of, I guess, what you would, or maybe we would call sort of actually seriously sort of winning pieces of work or bidding for pieces of work. What was that kind of timeline like from having sort of employee 1 to kind of being at a point where you kind of said, I'm running a full and proper sort of consulting business here. We're going to bid projects. You've brought in, 3, 4, someone who's a right-hand person to help you day to day with the strategy and the running of the business. What was that timeline like, Steve? If you wouldn't mind kind of,
That
giving
was
us a
3
more
years,
elaborated.
but we had
Yeah.
COVID right in the middle of it, which sort of, any plans that we had were like, okay, what we
Kiboshed.
do now? Yeah.
Yeah.
But we were
Yeah.
lucky enough to have some things that were going on in COVID. So we maintained that sort of 8 to 10 people.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Up to a point. But then
Yeah.
there was a conversation with the person that's my commercial director now.
Yes.
And she came and saw me and said, look, you've got good reputation, but at the moment, the work that you're picking up tends to be, we'll go and sort something out that didn't go quite right on somebody else's project or bits and pieces there.
Yeah.
And really, I sort of realized myself that I didn't know how to get into that space on my own to be, in the mix for RFPs, projects myself, all of those
Sure.
sorts of things.
And was that quite a big learning curve then, Steve, as in when you get to that point, as in where the commercial director comes along to you and says, right, Steve, as opposed to exactly what you say, and it does happen quite organically from the, you go in, you help a customer and they say to you, Steve, well, can you help us with this? And then, if you're in a certain industry or you've got a certain specialism, then someone talks to someone and then, they reach out to you, Steve, well, actually, Steve, could you help us? And, you're fitting resources onto projects. But to then take that sort of, I guess, that model to then a much more strategic piece of, okay, we're now actually going to start bidding and looking to win brand new greenfield projects. How did your role change a little bit at that point? Did you have to step back from, I guess, what maybe you were doing day to day, which is, I don't know, were you still doing some consulting at that point? Were you still on site?
Yeah, no, I still do. I still do some now, actually, which
Yeah.
I don't think is actually a good idea, but I just don't think they'll leave it behind. But,
do you still enjoy it?
Sometimes, I did a go live a couple of months ago, and it was nice to be back on it. And I'm still I still have to keep my solution architect MB700 up to date because I'm not quite ready to let that go yet.
Yeah,
but it's getting close now because I'm running out of time. But in the early days, when you're trying to start something from scratch, you're wearing many hats. So
of course.
So yes, we've got a commercial director, but we were doing sales between us. It's even to this day, a lot of the projects we get, some of them are from the sales team, some of them are from myself and connections and previous customers. So there's a lot to learn, and actually the Microsoft side of things and having the relationships there and relationships with other partners and building those sorts of things, they're key to what we do now.
Absolutely.
And then the new skills.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I sort of, as we're talking there and sort of thinking about that conversation, when you've got potentially leads coming in through such various different sources, it may be like another partner that says, hey, Steve, we don't really have these skills at the moment, or we're fully utilized. Could you give us 1 or 2 of your people and help manage that? Or it may be a specific thing where the commercial director goes out and wins a brand new greenfield piece of project. Are there any, when you kind of make that first connection, that first communication with a client, are there ever any clear red flags when you have early conversations or you have those conversations where you think, I may face some significant challenges with this project or with this customer that, it's just because, again, I sort of look at it and and I can imagine commercially as a business, you bring revenue in from having customers and having people on site and chargeable, and you have statements of work and you deliver statements of work for people. So I can imagine, someone comes along and says, Steve, we want you to help us. Here's a statement of work. And great, brilliant, I've got that. But are there any times where you've sat there, or are there times where you sit there and you look and think, and what are those potential red flags? I think it'd be interesting to sort of get your insights into that.
The big red flags for me these days, we need information to be able to give that SOW, and a lot of the
Yeah.
times, or not a lot of the time, but quite a lot of the time, when we're talking about clients and we want a specific level of information, it's so that we can actually give them what they're asking for, and sometimes getting that information is really harder than it should be. And if you're saying to somebody, how many countries do you operate in, and they're like, well, why does that matter? You're sitting there thinking, right, this is going to be more difficult than yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're in fiscal countries, or if you're in, you've got strange manufacturing operations or massive distribution channels and things like that you're not telling us about, and then you want us to give you a price based on what you've told us, it's not going to be right.
Yeah.
And that it can create issues, as you get into the project and you say your scope is very different to what we first thought. So we have to battle a little at the first stages to make sure we get enough information to be able to say, we'll do it. This is what it will look like. These days, more of the challenges, I think there's a lot of challenge these days around what people can do internally and what people can't.
Right.
When we were back in the sort of like world of 2012, and that was what they were getting, and you weren't linking quite so many systems together and things like
Sure.
that, it was easier. But now there is quite a thought that we'll do that internally. We'll cover this, we'll cover that. And very often you sit there and you think, I don't think they'll be able to do that. And
Yeah.
it's not because of levels of intelligence or levels of skills. It's literally a case of, this is complicated and we work in it all of the time and we find it complicated.
Yeah. No, I understand.
So yeah, they tend to be the issues more and more, but you learn and you evolve a bit. And that's where we're trying to put more focus on doing things better, showing people how to do things, giving them tools to take things further on instead.
Yeah, absolutely. And Steve, that sort of statement of work piece, do you ever get to a point, and I'm sure you have done, but where you've had to walk away from something because quite simply you haven't? I mean, it was funny because when you were talking to me then, and at a different level, but I have, and sometimes day to day, a similar challenge. We have a client bring us up, and I go, "Hi Phil, can you help us with a requirement?" And I go, "Yeah, maybe what's the salary? What's the on-site present? What's the
Yeah.
location?" And when I'm getting, I'm not really sure what the sort of salary is. Well, what do I think? And I'm kind of going, well, I think I know what you need to pay, but you also need to know if you've got the budget to pay it. So there's no point in me going out and spending a day, a week, 2 weeks sourcing resources for you at a certain salary bracket if you haven't got approval to hire that level. Or sometimes a day rate piece. It might be someone says, I want a contractor, and they sort of give you I will pay market rates. Okay, well, market rates for a functional consultant, as you're aware, Steve, could be, depending on someone's years of experience, from £500 to £1,000 a day, depending on what you're after. And it just resonated with me because it is so vital that you do have that depth of detail and information to be able to do a proper job. We can't help a customer without, and I don't need a 4-page job specification, but a brief and a clear guideline about what you're paying. And I guess in some ways, your briefs are much more detailed, your statements of work, but I'm guessing that's the point, isn't it? And the other sort of point or question I'd like to ask you, have you ever walked away from something where you've just said, I can't do this, because you can't give them an actual statement of work, or you don't want to go into a project going, well, this could be a massive loss leader, because if we commit to doing this, and we could cause us all sorts of problem down the line.
Yes, we have had to, and it happens more often than you'd think, actually.
Really?
One of the biggest conversations we have a lot is Business Central or FNSCM and those sorts of
Yeah.
things. And
Okay.
yeah, that can be a challenging conversation, because obviously one is a cheaper license fee,
Yeah.
and that people are attracted to that. I'm going to be able to do this
Of
cheaper, I'm going to
course.
save money, but I do think we're in a place now where you've got a lot of this sort of like Instagram, where everybody says everything's amazing, and LinkedIn, Instagram, and we're using the Guide 365 platform now, so we can actually do a direct comparison between the two and give people some factual information.
Yeah.
We do still get them where people say, "Oh, you must be able to do it for that price. We can't believe how expensive it's going to be." And you're like, "Yeah, but there's no realism here in what's actually got to be done. You can't skip testing your system. You can't skip people being trained, or you will pay for it afterwards."
Yeah.
My
Can't
golden
skip
rule,
data
really,
migration. Yeah.
if you can get to in the high 90s for your UAT, and you focus on getting to that stage, then all the money that you think you've spent on that phase, you get it back in spades from having a great go live afterwards.
Absolutely.
But yeah, people don't necessarily want to put that bit of extra effort in or that extra cycle. They say, well, we're going live then, and that's it, and we'll save some money there. And 3 months later, it's still, our month end process isn't great and things like that. So yeah.
And I guess from what you're saying, Steve, often people will just end up paying probably evidently more just further down the line. So it's kind of that shortcut actually becomes totally cost ineffective, because you end up just paying X amount of thousands more because you're having to fix problems further down the line, coupled with the fact that you've gone live with a system that users are probably griping about, which again is no good thing, because ideally I always think about it, and again from an external point of view, is when we have it a little bit, we're changing our CRM system shortly at the moment, but for me, when I think about implementing a new system to our workforce, I want the users to be like, this is great, this is brilliant, like this has improved what I do day to day. It makes my job easier and more enjoyable. And I guess sometimes cutting those corners and not testing things and then having issues, running accounts at the end of the month or whatever it may be. And if you're getting issues and things aren't correct, I can imagine the users then are probably a little dissatisfied.
I did a project, I think it was about 4 years ago now. And, the testing on it was exemplary, and everything was prepared. Everyone was trained. And then it came to the go live, and we were going to kick off the first store at midnight on the first night. And everyone was like, I wonder how this is going to go. And it was brilliant. It was, we were going live in a country a day.
Brilliant.
But the whole atmosphere of the whole project was, people cheering, and I'm like, well, this is a bit strange, but it's only ERP, but but it was good. It was great. And that's what, if you can get to that place, then for whatever you want to do afterwards, people will always remember that.
No, absolutely. And I think it is, again, what you said there, Steve, because I think sometimes people have been through these projects before and had negative experiences. I guess it's like anything in the modern world. It's like sort of restaurant reviews. People always like to leave negative reviews, and systems implementation. People like to tell you the horror stories, but people do go through them, and probably more regularly than they ideally should do. So I think when you get that reaction, it's probably because there maybe has been some scar tissue before where people have been on an implementation. I mean, we've been working with a customer over the last 3 or 4 years, a large global customer that had tried 2 or 3 times previously with a Dynamics project over various versions, and had failed's a strong word, but certainly hadn't achieved anywhere near the level of success that they wanted to achieve. And where they're at now, it's poles apart. They're on this system and this rollout. It's hugely successful, and the sense of I guess sort of community and I guess pride in the team is significant. People are really proud to be on the project and doing what they're doing, and it's really good to see when you hear about that. And it's nice to hear that that you guys are being involved in such great success stories. When you think about, Steve, I guess, so we bring up to modern day, or sort of where you were at Snowden, early days, a handful of employees, you had COVID hits, but you managed to keep going. You're kind of at 10 employees. What is one of the biggest challenges, or what are some of the biggest challenges for you as a owner, director, consultancy leader of a business? What are the biggest challenges that you kind of face day in, day out, week in, week out, and year on year is kind of in the back of your mind as a challenge? And then I guess then on the flip side to that is, how do you kind of look to, I guess, overcome those challenges? What can you do, and how can you kind of, I guess, mitigate any risks that might be there?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things to that. So I think the first part really is about when you're coming from that company of 10.
Yeah.
In those early stages, it's about, I've got 10 people and I want enough work for 10 people. You're not actually sitting there thinking, I need to build a pipeline for the next 2 or 3 years. You're just sitting there thinking, I want enough work for those people.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the same. So we've sort of like had the 100% growth from the 10 to 20 in 1 year, and et cetera. And even when you get to like the 20s, 25s, you're still sitting there thinking, okay, I've got enough projects. Everybody's good. Win another project, and that's all good. When you start getting past the 50s and the 60 marks, that sort of flips on its head, and you're like, we need a pipeline now. Just with that going. So that's been a challenge. In the day-to-day side, some of it's personal as well as sort of like business, to be honest.
Okay.
A lot of the people that are on the team are people that I'd worked with before. They'd actually said, I'd like to come and work with you. That was great. We're on that project. So, sort of like that separation between being a boss and being a friend can be quite tough, if I'm honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, and getting older, not being grumpy and those sorts of things. But yeah, and it's about changing my own mindset on things as well, because if I see something, I just want to get it done, which is great when you're doing ERP implementations.
Sure.
But on other tasks, sometimes a little bit more caution is required, or people don't work in the same way, or there's that emotional side of things that needs to come into it as well, and not just say those things. But I'm always told we've got a great culture in the company, so and we have great retention levels. But that, from a personal side, that bit's quite difficult to navigate through.
Yeah.
From a business side, it's just how much things keep evolving. When we first set up, we were an F&SCM partner. That was our 10, 20 people. It was all F&SCM, warehouse, manufacturing, retail, but it wasn't enough. So, where's the data migration people? Where's the project management team? Where's you're going to be using Power Apps. You're going to be using Dataverse. And to build that rounded team now, you're not going to do that with 10 or 20 people. And that's why we're now the size we are now, because our mission really last year was to make sure that we've got the structure to support that level of people, because it can't just be me doing all of the performance reviews and all of those.
Yeah, it's impossible.
But making, you can actually use the Microsoft stack and do anything that people ask for. And that's been a challenge, bringing all of those different skill sets together, getting them work across there. And the technology is always advancing, 2 big releases a year, making sure people are keeping on top of those things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a point you mentioned there, Steve, because obviously I've known you for a long time, and I know Joe, who works with me at Catch, has again worked with you for a long time at Snowden, and sort of helped source people for you over the years. And I think it's a point. And I always know Joe often will say to me, or will sometimes say, I've identified, or I've spoken to someone who's like, I know Steve will like them. He'll always say, he's like, he says to me, I know Steve will like this person. He said, I could just, and it's a profile of person. And I do think, certainly from a recruitment perspective, good recruiters who have good relationships with clients understand their clients at a level of depth. It's a bit like we were talking about earlier. If you have a good relationship with your customer, and it's a deep relationship, and it's open and it's honest, and there's lots of, information sharing back and forth, you can do a really good job for them. If they give you the absolute bare minimum, and you have not as much FaceTime or as contact as you like, it makes it more difficult. So the more contact and the deeper your relationships. But it's also about, for us, understanding the people, the culture. What works for you and for Snowden may be perfect for you, but in maybe like a Big Four environment, that person might say, that's not what I want. I don't want to be that, but there is exactly the environment that works for me. And I think it's hugely valuable to, I guess, have that understanding and that depth of the people that we work with. But it is part of a culture that you have created there, because I do think you have created that culture on the back of, and it probably stems from you, I guess, it was your business. You probably look at people and get involved in those interviews and look at people that have some similar personality traits yourself. It's natural, isn't it? It must be.
No, it is. That's it's exactly what I do look for, personality in there, because you're going to be working with other people, so you want them to. I do say to a lot of the guys, 50% of what we do is knowing the skills and knowing how to configure the system. But if you can, help people, show them the way, help them learn, have a great relationship. I don't mean like going to the pub every day or something like that, although that was more back in the old days. But a little bit of a, or not a friendship, even just a bit of camaraderie, somebody that can support them. Often they do become sort of friends that you go to see 2 or 3 years later and say, how are you getting on? But we've got clients. I don't think we've really got many clients that we don't still talk to. And we're talking like 8-10 years later. It's quite a nice story. Just recently we did 2012, and then they went to D365 and they came back and just said, oh, can you do the next one for us now? So that's quite rare, I think, a lot of the time.
I completely agree. I think it is, and I think that's testament to the business and the profile and the people that you have within the business there. And it's that repeatability. It's the fact that they get this, not necessarily the same people, but they get the same profile of individual. They get the same experience from where they came to you back in 2012 to D365 to a latest release. the customer gets the same experience, that continuity for a customer, especially with systems implementation, it must be huge to know that, well, we've used Snowden twice previously. It was a success. Well, why wouldn't we use them again? Having that relationship is huge. And Steve, if you kind of looking ahead, bearing in mind that, and you've mentioned it there, the rapid updates, new features within D365, how do you stay ahead of that? With your team, that must be a sort of a reasonable challenge. I'll never forget years and years ago when Microsoft were messing around with the versions, and it's a lot clearer now. And we had a point in which where 2012 was going to be then the next release, it went sort of 2012 version 1, 2, 3 maybe, and then it was going to be AX7, then it was going to be AX 2015, and then the partners couldn't sell anything for a while, and it was chaotic because no one knew how to sell a license because there was no clear licensing model. And it's probably a different challenge now because I guess they've got those bits are a little bit clearer, but with the rapid changing and of updates and the features, how do you kind of stay ahead of that? Is that one of the biggest business challenges you have?
It is, but we're quite lucky, and probably some of that does come into that personality side again, is that a lot of the guys that work for us are actually quite keen on, quite interested in what's going on. It's we have a Teams chat, and it's just we have a group chat, and we have another chat that's just called Help. So somebody will see something that's like really quite cool, like the new warehouse management app with animal noises. That's created quite. But we're always looking, and the new AI features in finance, all of those things. It's a case of, has anybody seen this? So so as long as you've got an interest, and it's a bit like what we do when we take people on. Actually, sometimes when we're taking someone on, if they've come from an end user, we don't prescribe which area they're going to work in initially.
Okay.
Because if you're interested in something, you're going to learn more. So
absolutely.
So if they came in and I said, right, you're going to be on the warehouse management app, and actually what they're really interested in is finance, you're probably not going to get too far. So take a little time, see what their skill set is, see where their interest is, because then they'll always keep up to date afterwards. And that's true for everybody, I think, that works for us, to be honest.
Yeah, fine. And Steve, just talking on that piece, because I know I guess over the years there had been, you had always looked at that profile of candidate has always sort of piqued your interest. Someone that's been in an end user environment, that's certainly I guess open-minded and broad of what they're going to do in the future, what their job role might be, but they've got the right personality traits, the right aptitude, the right sort of intelligence level, as you may say, to develop into being a consultant. How does that differ then, though, as the business grows? And obviously then you have to start looking at maybe bringing in people that are more established, are more senior, have got, I guess, more experience of coming in as a consultant. Is that a little bit harder to recruit for you as a business, as a consultancy owner?
It is. We've probably not hit the number where it's really hurting, or I say hurting, really causing too much an issue, because we're looking after people. People are still getting that career path, and I think when they do see somebody more senior come in, they realise that it's being done for the right business reasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
And often they will then work with those people, and it will upskill them. So, and I think people within the organisation get that. They don't sit there thinking, I'm not going to get this opportunity. It's more a case of, I can learn from that person and evolve later. But I'm sure at some point we will probably have some people that feel that they could have perhaps taken that role, like I did when I was younger and I got looked over on certain things.
And I think so. But I think, like you say, the culture that you've created within the organization, as far as I can establish from an outsider looking in, is like there isn't really a ceiling. There is opportunity, there is growth, and it's a collaborative environment, and people work together, and people work as a team, and people have FaceTime with people. I think that's something that's a big problem, across sort of businesses and IT and tech, is people just wanting to work from home all the time. People, not having their cameras on when they have Teams calls, and it's kind of this thing of just being faceless and nameless. And I think in a world of AI, which is that we're sort of going into a different era with it, and I think there's some wonderful advancements, but I always come back to it and I say it, and I probably bore my staff sometimes with it, sometimes, Steve, if I'm honest. But I always say the power of a human relationship, and being a human being and building a relationship with people and working with someone as in human being to human being and solving problems, that shouldn't ever go. And that's an art form, and being good at that is really important. So AI is a great advancement to help you do certain things, but I think the people that really push themselves to be a face to be on calls, to meet customers that do want to go on site. I think those are the people that will really truly advance themselves a lot quicker than those that kind of want to step back and I guess, be less present. Steve, what does the future look like for you? If, do you have, and I'm sure you do have sort of plans, but, if you look 5 or 10 years down the line from now, we're 2025, if you look at 2030 and you sort of sat there and maybe on holiday and you look back at, the last 5 years, do you have an idea of where you'd like to be and where you'd like to go with the business? Apart from maybe doing a little bit less work and maybe enjoying a bit more life.
Yeah. So in 10 years, it'll definitely be, I've got to be looking at the retirement thing, really. I think I've done this long enough then.
Yeah.
So we're sort of gearing up for first part of this year. We could see that things were changing. So, there is automation, like the platform I mentioned, like the guide platform, RFPs, fit gaps and all of those things could be streamlined. And, fortunately, we're at a size to say, right, let's take stock of where we're at. We've got all of these new fancy tools that can do all of these things for us. And let's put ourselves in a position where we can utilize those and make ourselves lean and sort of like, it's almost like job protection for the guys in the organization.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, we've been through that process for the last few months. And the other side that was great about that is that some of the people that we just talked about that perhaps, not flat out on a project, they're all involved. So we're not sort of like excluding everyone. So they might not be training up to be their warehouse consultant, but they're now learning some of these other tools. We've actually got a launch of some new stuff coming, so I can't say too much yet. But new website, new products, our first products actually.
Good.
And so that's one of the areas where we're definitely looking at. There's some partnerships also that are coming out in the very near future. And, I wouldn't be surprised to see SNCL a little bit further than just the UK and a few in Europe is probably
good.
The answer that I would give you on that one.
Yeah.
Where we end up, I don't know. I think we'll be guided a little bit by the application and, some of the new things that we're doing as well that may not be just Dynamics related, but
of course.
It's going to be exciting times. And a lot of the guys in the organization do know bits and pieces, but hopefully they'll like it.
Good. I'm sure they will, Steve. I think you've got people there that have been with you a long time, and you've created a great business there. Before you go, there's a question that I always like to ask everyone that I speak to. You mentioned there a customer or an ex-customer coming back to you, or a friend or a CIO or a CFO that you maybe know from social, a social environment, and they come along and they knock on your door and they say, "Hey, Steve, I've been through. We've done a product selection piece. We're going to be implementing Microsoft Dynamics, and we're going to go on a journey, global piece of work over the next few years." Are there any 2 or 3 key pieces of advice that you would look to say, look, a couple of pieces of advice that you, the customer, the business should be aware of when going into this project, and things that, you should consider doing or being aware of, or whatever it may be? But is there anything specifically that you would kind of lean on and you think there, what advice you might give someone that's about to do that?
On a global rollout, the absolute sort of critical part is you've got to get that first template. So if you're going to roll out to other countries, and yes, there's obviously nuances and they could be doing different things in different countries.
Sure.
But pick a hard one. Don't say we're going to do a global template and then pick the sales office. And then when you move to your next 3 countries, you've got huge manufacturing facility or something really complicated. You can always turn stuff off, but turning stuff on when you haven't gone through the initial process in the first place. So the first one can be hard, but then the rest becomes significantly easier because everybody knows everything and everybody gets in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
The one that we see more than anything now when we're talking about global processes, because people will be on different systems, and it's the data, and data will become harder and harder as you get more applications and want to do more things in different areas. So that's an area where you've got to be absolutely at the top of your game. If you get your data right and you get that first template right, then everything else will become a lot more straightforward. But
brilliant.
Fail on either of those and you're going to be having an upward battle for years. So.
Yeah, you're going to be struggling. Steve, that's really interesting. It's such a good point when you think about it. It's it's sometimes making your life a little bit more difficult at the beginning, challenging to get that template right for, I guess what you're suggesting is kind of the biggest, maybe the most complex site you've got within the business, that's what the template should almost be based upon. And the data piece is vital, isn't it? You hear about it all the time, data migration being left till later in the day, not being at the forefront. Steve, that's brilliant. Steve, thank you so much for your time today. I've taken up plenty of your time. I know you're busy and you've got plenty on, but thank you so much for talking to us about how you got into the market. The journey that you've gone on from being a super highly regarded individual independent contractor within our space to growing a fantastic consultancy business there that you have got at Snowden. So yeah, thank you ever so much for your time.
No, thank you, Phil. And I just want to return the compliment. Catch has been at the forefront of D365 recruitment for as long as I've been in the game. So I'm not quite sure how long. You look a lot younger than I do. So how long you've been doing it?
I got into it, when I was in my early 20s. I'm getting a little bit older and a little bit grayer now, Steve. I blame my children for that. But I think we've worked together for a long time. So, and that's everything about this market. It's everything that I enjoy about it. It's relationships, it's longevity, and it's like what we talked about as we were talking earlier. It's about actually, knowing the people you're dealing with and building some proper relationships. It can make things a lot easier. That's for sure.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you for listening today. Please subscribe to stay up to date with our latest episodes and watch the full video episodes on YouTube.